welcome everybody to Failing Forward, the first episode of Failing Forward. I'm your host, Gerad Wunderlich. And to be completely transparent, this is actually the second time I've recorded this episode. I feel this is very important to note because on this show, we're going to uncover moments of my life and the lives of guests that most would consider pretty vulnerable. The show will not be the traditional highlight reel of social media where we only see the edited, the filtered, the photoshopped versions of our lives. This is the dirty parts, the parts we brush under the rug. And I feel it's important to be completely transparent and honest with you in this moment because I wasn't completely happy with how I performed when we tried this the first time. There were points that I wanted to make that I didn't get to. And to be quite frank, I was very nervous. This is a new venture for me. It's something I'm learning to do. And I wanted to do better for you guys. And as I mentioned, this show is going to be hopefully the exact opposite of what we traditionally see on social media. This is not going to be the airbrushed highlight reel of life that we tend to get a glance of. The purpose of Failing Forward is to bring attention to the moments of life that we do commonly brush under the rug. This is the broken relationships, the businesses that didn't succeed, the jobs or promotions we didn't get, even the depression and anxiety some of us will face or do face. But more importantly, the purpose of this show is to identify the opportunities hidden within these moments. I'm a huge believer in the benefits of failure or the opportunities within those situations. As someone who dealt with depression for over a decade and has dealt with anxiety for the majority of their life, more than 20 years at this point, I've faced moments of uncertainty that I'm sure many of you have experienced as well. The moments of unworthiness and doubt, the moments of fear and uncertainty, and the moments where it seems you're the only person who feels this way. I'm here to tell you today that you're not alone. And I absolutely believe in the importance of verbalizing that. Because in my first few weeks, months, and even years of facing depression, it absolutely felt like I was the only one. And although logically that's not the case, you're constantly in a mental state where you are comparing what you're experiencing to what you believe everyone else is experiencing. And it can make you feel very alone. It's commonly understood that we do learn from our mistakes. We've been taught that since we were kids. But very rarely do we have the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of others. Failing Forward's purpose is to help us all learn from the mistakes of others. Through my first few years with depression, I became so accustomed to the darkness that I was certain that eventually my depression would win. I became so certain of its hold on me that I began to convince myself that my inevitable death would serve a beneficial role. I was literally attaching positive purpose to my not being here. And I've only verbalized that to a couple of people before. People I consider myself very close to. And that's likely because, one, it's not a comfortable thing to explain. And two, because people who don't have those thoughts typically can take hearing that in the wrong way. It can come across very, very uncomfortable, to say the least. But I do believe that there's purpose and power in talking about these things. And before I go any further, I do want to mention that I'm not here to inspire you to go share every vulnerable moment you've ever had. Because there are some things that we do want to keep to ourselves, and I understand that. I, however, have attached purpose to my own shortcomings and failures. And in order to fulfill that purpose, that involves some sharing vulnerable moments like this. But again, I was at a point in the very recent past where I had attached a positivity essentially to my death. What I believe by that is that I thought some good would come from it. And for those of you that do experience depression or anxiety, you may be familiar with this thought process. But for me, it was almost a fantasy of what could happen after I was gone. I was very comfortable imagining what people might say at my funeral, whether it be my parents or a close friend. And I also believe that if I let depression win, that someone close to me would take that as an opportunity to do some good with it. Maybe starting a foundation that would shed more light on mental health. And as odd as it sounds, I literally believed that my death would lead to fewer deaths later, which is oddly makes a lot of sense to me some days, and others, it seems extremely illogical. But eventually I transitioned from attaching meaning to my death to attaching meaning to my life. I started to create the idea that I could do more good through my actions in life than what I could accomplish through no action at all. Which seems obvious, but again, for people who do deal with similar mental health hurdles, this can be a very common conversation. It's a completely normal part of our thought process for some of us. Before I do go further, I want to tell you that I did not have one impactful moment that caused that transition or any of the transitions I've made, because that's just not the way life works. Life is not like the movies. Your life will not dramatically change because of one defining moment. The example I like to use is the movie Pursuit of Happiness. Will Smith's character experiences just the most dramatic discomfort a person can experience. And you're along for the ride as the viewer. And it's one moment in the movie that changes the direction of his life. It changes the direction of the movie. It changes the tone of the movie. But again, that's not the way life will work for you or I or anybody. Life has the ability to change, but it changes slowly through dozens, if not hundreds, of small but crucial decisions. Decisions that give you a fighting chance. One of those decisions was to change the vocabulary I used when talking to myself. I realized the harm I was causing by using the word certain. You see, when we're certain of our beliefs or our ideas, we eliminate the drive to seek new information. When we're certain, we're saying to ourselves, I know all there is to know about this, and my decision is made. And a lot of us are probably very familiar with this right now. We're at what some would call pivotal moment approaching an election. And we experience and witness more division than I think any of us have probably ever experienced in our lifetime. And it's because of certainty. And I know this doesn't paint the picture for everybody in our nation, but we have a large percentage of people who are so certain that their beliefs and their ideas are the right way of thinking that listening to another idea or opinion is impossible. There's damage to be done when we're certain. And the goal in life isn't to be certain. It's the exact opposite, in fact. We're here to be curious. When we're curious, we ask more questions and we seek new perspectives. So instead of being certain of my depression, I became curious of it. Instead of accepting my circumstances, I questioned them. And instead of continuing to ask, what did I do to deserve this? I changed the question to, what is the universe preparing me for? It's funny. As toddlers, we question our entire world. We ask why to every single piece of new information we're exposed to. We are obsessed with attaching meaning to everything. For those of you that have young kids, they're probably asking you why right now. Why are you listening to that? Why do you have headphones on? Why are you sitting down? We as a intuitive species want to understand our world. We always seek meaning. But at some point, we transitioned from being curious to being certain. We stopped questioning our circumstances and our world, and we chose to accept it as is. And that's why we have something called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when we're interacting with a person or even a group of people, typically people we don't know very well, and we respond to everything they say with, yeah, absolutely, of course. Even if we know absolutely nothing about what they're talking about. We are so focused on what others think of us, in that case, in terms of intellect, that we avoid asking questions entirely in order to avoid appearing like we don't understand. We simply nod along in agreement to avoid the attention being brought to us as someone who doesn't have the same knowledge on the topic. Which is the most counterintuitive thing I've ever heard. Because, I mean, the amount of knowledge we actually know is so insignificant. Yet we still walk around and act like we don't need to learn anything else. Allowing myself to be curious of my depression changed the entire perspective I had of not only mental health, but my perspective of the world. And not all questions are answered immediately. In fact, very few are. But I've learned that a curious mind is an open mind. And an open mind listens. To use that example of our political disagreements that we currently face, I'm sure most of you have seen these clips or videos online of interactions between people from the left or the right. And there's not even conversation. In fact, for those of you that watch the recent debates, I would argue that those probably didn't have a lot of solid conversation. It was two people, and it always is, who are shaking their head in disapproval of the other and are preparing to speak again rather than listening what the other has to say. And just so you're aware, this is not going to be a political podcast in any way, shape, or mind. But it's a very real first world analogy of what we all experience as individuals, and unfortunately, what we've conditioned ourselves to act like in the world. One of the most important lessons I've learned over the last decade is to listen to myself. But again, to do so, I have to be curious, cannot be certain. I listen to the physical changes that take place when I begin talking about specific topics or even taking specific actions. I noticed that the more I questioned the state of my mental health, the more comfortable I became talking about it. And the more I talked about it, the more noticeable those physical responses became. Physical responses like my posture changing, my voice getting louder and more confident, and the hair on my arms standing up. And eventually those steps, although minor on their own, but monumental when put together, helped me answer the question I had been asking myself for the 5 years prior. My depression now had purpose. A purpose that I will allow to continue to evolve just as I do. And this purpose is what led me to this moment today. Speaking about a very vulnerable and personal aspect of my life. And I'm doing it because of all of you. I believe I face depression for the purpose of helping others who face this as well. But as I mentioned, this purpose has developed over time, and it will continue to do so. Because I've continued to maintain my curiosity. Even after receiving my initial answer, this purpose has developed into a recognition of human conditioning. We do not talk about mental health because we've been taught not to. It's the same reason we keep every failure we've ever experienced to ourselves. If you've run into an old friend, maybe spoke to a family member at a reunion, you don't immediately start digging through the failures of life to share with them. We do the exact opposite, in fact. We talk about the few things that sound like accomplishments or achievements. So I bought a new house. I have a new relationship. We're having a child. I got a new job. I got a promotion. And don't get me wrong, these are good things. You should absolutely discuss these things. Be proud of what you've achieved. It's not my point at all to devalue these things that cause us to feel fulfilled and happy and content. Those things have purpose as well. The point I'm trying to make is that we eliminate the majority of experiences and the lessons that come with them simply because we're concerned about what others will think. The person who failed out of college learned something through that process. The person who failed not one but two businesses learned something, probably multiple things from that process. Losing family members or those we're close with too early, or maybe what seemed like a perfect relationship ending, those all have lessons for us. And we know this. We understand these are learning opportunities. But there's purpose in sharing them as well. Because if we can learn from our own mistakes, What limit can we put on ourselves if we can also learn from the mistakes of others? It's really no surprise that we avoid speaking of our shortcomings, our hurdles, our stressors. We're prideful. We don't want to be seen in a negative light. And that's partly because we're slightly obsessed with what other people think of us. There's actually a sociologist in the early 1900s, Charles Horton Cooley, who wrote, "I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am." And it's because of this that I kept my personal battles hidden from the world for over 4 years. And it's because of this that most of you will do or have done the same. But I hope to change that. I hope to give a voice to those who aren't yet confident enough to use their own. I even like to say I'm obsessed with alchemy, which is my inner nerd speaking. For those of you that aren't aware, alchemy is essentially taking something and turning it into something with value. And until I understood that many of these hurdles and stressors and failures that I had in life had value, I really don't know that I would still be here today if I hadn't made that realization. It's really, really easy to hate something that you don't think has value. But until you pick it up, analyze it, question it, attempt to answer it, it never will. As we continue to brush these topics under the rug, avoid them entirely, we're pushing ourselves farther away from our ability to grow and develop as individuals and as a human race. Throughout the rest of this season, and hopefully beyond, you'll hear from me and some amazing people who will share some of their failures they've experienced, what they've learned from them, and how they grew from them. Now, today, I'm obviously without a guest on this episode, and that's because I didn't feel right asking guests to do something that I myself have not done. And this is absolutely something that I have not done. Over the years, as my purpose became more defined, I didn't know how to start. But I know the first step was being more verbal, was being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So the first logical step was, if I was in the room with someone who I thought maybe was dealing with something similar, I would acknowledge my own depression, either in front of them or maybe the whole group. Because at the very least, I was letting them know they weren't alone. And again, going back to those physical changes that we try to pick up on when we speak a certain way or act a certain way, it was at this point that I started to see those, because I started to see more and more people responding to me or contacting me later to let them know that they appreciated my opening up. And some of those people have even gone on to exchange information with me. And I've been a person that they've reached out to on days they needed someone. And it's those moments, although, sometimes few and far between, that have allowed me to continue down this path to where I am now. I believe that this podcast, this program, the purpose of this is tied to my purpose. At the very least, it will lead me to where I'm going next. What I do know is that I'll continue using the gifts I have or the skills I've attempted to perfect over the years, and I will use them to speak to the things and the people that provide me fulfillment. I've spoken openly about my experiences with mental health before, but never on this level. Speaking about it today is a little less comfortable, I'm not going to lie. But I'm still glad I'm doing it. I know the value that it holds. I wanted to set the tone by introducing myself to you, introducing you to a part of my story, and help you understand what I hope to accomplish with my time in this environment. For those of you who did tune in today, I sincerely appreciate it. This has been something that I've considered doing for the last 4 or 5 years. I've picked it up and set it down probably a dozen times. And I've known all this time that I at least need to try. If it fails, well, I'll find the lesson in it. But if you're someone who doesn't experience hurdles in terms of mental health, I still hope you were able to take something beneficial away from this today. I would be willing to bet that there's someone close to you, someone in your life who does battle with this. You might not be aware of it, but I would imagine they're there. And you serve just as important of a role in their life as they do in their own. Because hopefully one day they will reach out to you. They will want to talk. And in later episodes, we'll talk about topics of how you can respond best, how you can be the most supportive person for them. And they will absolutely appreciate you for that. Aside from that, though, I promise that there will be lessons to be learned in upcoming episodes. I have everything from entrepreneurs to professional athletes coming on as guests in the near future. And each of them are coming with a story to tell. We are going to work through those vulnerable, sometimes private moments that we typically do not share with anybody, much less large audiences. But my guests, like me, understand that there is value in those moments of life. And those guests, like me, want to see other people grow. They want to see other people succeed. They want to see other people overcome the hurdles we all face. Because more often than not, put yourself in the room with anybody. Your list of similarities will absolutely and always be shorter than your list of failures. There will always be more in common with what you've tried to do but failed at than what you've succeeded at. Again, for those of you that did tune in today, thank you very much. You really have no idea what it took for us to get to this point. And your focus and attention today means the world to us. If you'd like to stay up to date with our podcast, see teasers of new episodes, clips from past guests, follow us on Instagram at Failing Forward Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be or interested in being a guest with us, send us a message on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you and love to get to know each of you as well. Thank you again. It really does mean the world to me just to be here at all. And remember, no matter how hard you fail, keep failing forward. See you next week.